So, I welcome all of our viewers. Today we have the honor of hosting a very interesting guest. It is my great pleasure to introduce Andrea Kalan, the spokesperson for the US State Department. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for finding time to join us today in our program. I'm confident it will have a great and engaging discussion, just as our viewers anticipate.
Yes, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak to you today.
Andrea, to begin with, I realize that you are not a military expert, but you for sure have your own point of view on this. What do you think is the reason for such an aggressive behavior of the Russian army right now, specifically the increased rocket attacks targeting big cities that are not under occupation? They are using all possible equipment like Caliber and Kinjal missiles. What are the underlying motives and tactical approaches behind these actions?
At the moment, we see that Putin is seizing every opportunity to persist in his aggression against Ukraine. Recognizing his lack of success on the battlefield, he is looking for different opportunities to strike. When he has no success on the battlefields, they launch more missiles, drones, and etc. And indeed, the last couple of days, we have seen much more attacks and rockets, but we also see that the air defense is very effective and that the Ukrainian military is very effective in protecting civilians who just want to live peacefully in their cities. And by the way, this is what we see in the United States. We see how successfully our Ukrainian partners use air defense and other types of weapons. We remain committed to providing ongoing assistance, including military support, to ensure that Ukrainians can defend themselves.
We definitely will delve into the specifics of military aid later on, including units and numbers. But now I want to ask you about those doubts, which are pretty common in social media and even in the foreign press. Frankly speaking, I find it surprising that numerous self-proclaimed experts on platforms like YouTube present themselves as American or European authorities while actively promoting pro-Russian narratives. The obvious bias of these speakers may have a significant impact as their content reaches and influences ordinary people. So I wanted to ask you, how much this situation complicates communication with your society, as we see the taxpayers of the United States? Because quite often we can hear things like, here we are giving money from a budget to Ukraine. Why are we doing this? Does this affect the internal situation in the US, especially considering the upcoming elections, where certain groups might exploit the situation to their advantage?
First of all, it's obvious that a huge amount of disinformation and propaganda is coming from Russia. We do everything possible to counter this by providing accurate information and exposing the falsehoods propagated by these so-called experts. There is a lot of lie and propaganda in Russia and Russian-speaking space. That is why we conduct interviews and provide comments from the State Department in Russian language, allowing people to hear the truth in their own language. But it's also why we must fight against disinformation within the United States. It is crucial for everyone to think critically, analyze the sources of information, and determine what is indeed factual. A very common narrative that often comes up in the media is the belief that support for Ukraine will diminish after the elections. However, this is disinformation tactic and far from the truth. Our support for Ukraine remains unwavering, regardless of the ruling party. Actually, we already heard similar claims during the previous year's midterm elections, stating that the United States government would stop supporting Ukraine shortly after the election. However, in fact, we saw even more support after the election. So this is disinformation. It's a problem, it's an ongoing problem, and it's very challenging to fight. But everyone must check the information they get to know what is true and understand that the United States will continue helping Ukraine for as long as it's necessary.
And just to emphasize one more time, I understand that you are a representative of American politicians, but at the same time we know that you also have a very delicate relations with your society and attentively listen to its voice. That is why I continue discussing the wave of negative information circulating on social media and the internet, as it has the potential to influence public opinion and subsequently the voters. Do you perceive a consistent majority of Americans expressing support for Ukraine, or do you see that this percentage fluctuates because of these disinformation attacks? What would you say about the opinion of ordinary people in the US?
Indeed, I can say that Americans overwhelmingly support the ongoing aid to Ukraine. They see the actual situation in the Ukraine and the impact of Russian aggression on peaceful cities on television and the internet, so they know the truth. However, they are also exposed to disinformation. What I see that if we take a look at various polls conducted in America, we can notice that the number of Americans supporting Ukraine may fluctuate slightly from month to month, but the majority consistently express support and comprehends the situation. As an example, during my recent visit to Washington, I witnessed Ukrainian flags proudly placed everywhere. And not only in the city center, but also in the small neighborhoods. Similarly, when I visited London last week, I saw the same thing, Ukrainian flags, throughout the city. We all see that the support for Ukraine transcends borders, with people in the United States, England, Europe, and all around the world understanding the reality of the situation, independent of the propaganda spread.